cooking pan. And any barmaid can be a star maid if she dances with or without a fan. Hooray for Hollywood! When you're terrific if you're even good. Where anyone at all from Shirley Temple to Amy Semple is equally understood. Go out and try your luck, you may be Donald Duck. Hooray for Hollywood!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Damn You Hollywood, where, we review movies.
Where Robert's soul is crushed on a weekly basis.
Yeah, for those of you wondering why I'm even more lackadaisical and apathetic than usual, Mark and I kind of went over the schedule for 2019, 2020, and had a brief look at 2021. Yeah, it sucks ass. Like, it's just terrible. I couldn't find anything good to even remotely begin staving off the impetus to walk into oncoming traffic. Like, there's nothing. There's just nothing. It is a wasteland of creativity, budgetary expenditures, and the collective soul of popular culture, for whatever that's worth.
I, on the other hand, am so excited that I just can't hide it. I'm about to lose control, and I think I like it.
Your quoting of bad songs is doing nothing to endear any sort of respect. Respect. I did not mean respect.
That's not a bad song. You're a bad song.
I am not a bad song, for I am not lyrical.
Not
Anyway.
With that attitude, you won't be.
Anyway, I'm Robert Winfrey. Mark, look, if I were lyrical, I couldn't hate black people, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But I am not lyrical. There is no music in my soul.
I'll say.
For those of you not aware, if this is the first time you happen to hear our podcast, that's a reference to an on-running joke where Mark constantly calls me a racist.
Yeah!
I am not.
No.
You sounded so sad. You just had to acknowledge that I'm not a racist.
No, but these are things that are funny to me. So,
all right.
What are we talking about tonight, buddy?
Tonight we will be reviewing Ant-Man and the Wasp, the latest Marvel film, and we'll be yelling at critics for being bad at their jobs. We'll talk about the money. Mark will be happy that Solo cracked the top 10 for a week, because it's not going to be there next week.
No.
And we'll do plugs, which will go on for too long and not be funny, and not actually transfer any listenership. And then we'll close up shop. Did I miss anything?
No, that just about wraps it up.
Alrighty. So, Mark, how are you? How are things down in Florida?
Oh, I'm just ducky. I actually, last night we recorded a source material, and I was not in the world's greatest mood. But tonight, none of the things that put me in a bad mood last night happened tonight. So we're doing good.
Oh, that's good to hear. Alrighty. Now then, let's just... I mean, we have no shtick, so we're just going to go into the movie. We actually got our shtick out of the way before we started recording.
Yeah, we did our post-show shtick pre-show.
Yeah. Let us know how you feel about that. If you think that's a good idea, or if you want to be one of those people claiming that people are boycotting Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom as the box office return show. Never mind that it's made $1 billion.
Yeah, to the whoever commented on our Jurassic World podcast on YouTube and insisted that nobody wants to see any more Jurassic World movies, I'm just going to say maybe take a gander over at Box Office Mojo, or stay tuned to later on when we talk about the money, and I'm going to cover exactly how much moolah Jurassic World has made. Jurassic World.
I feel like that poor guy was. I don't know if he just got halfway through his comment and realized he was trying to talk about Star Wars instead of Jurassic World.
just went with it,
or if he just genuinely confused the two properties.
Yeah, I don't know. People are confused and strange. People are strange when you're a stranger. People look ugly when you're around. Women seem wicked.
Mark. There's a much better way to say what you just tried to say musically. It's that people suck.
Ugh. Speaking of sucking, let's continue this podcast.
Yeah, all right. And there's a segue. All right. Anyway, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Let's jump into this. This takes place, it is stated, 2 years after the events of Civil War. We get a brief flashback to Hank Pym, Michael Douglas, who is looking more and more like his father in every film, minus the upper body definition, and talking with his daughter about how he believes his wife Janet is still alive in the quantum realm now that Scott Lang has told them, hey, there's a thing. You don't just keep shrinking. There's actually, like, again, a whole, like, universe down there. And so he becomes obsessed with this, like you do. I'm not blaming the guy. We flash forward to what is essentially the present day, where Scott Lang, the affable Paul Rudd, who I was going to say something there, I'm not going to. Where he is nearing the end of his house arrest as part of his plea deal. You see, because after he and all the other guys who sided with Cap in Civil War got arrested, and then Cap broke them out of the raft because, hey, it's a supermax prison facility, but I'm Captain f***ing America.
Goddamn right.
Your prison means nothing. I breaks them all out. Hawkeye and Ant-Man, this is stated in Infinity War, rather than go on the run, decide to just cut deals, serve house arrest time, so they can be with their families. Hawkeye on his farm, where some poor FBI agent has to drive out to him on a semi-regular basis and constantly wonder what the hell is a mosquito. Because, as we all know, the FBI is universally portrayed that way on film. And Ant-Man here is about to be done with his time on house arrest and about to start his probationary period. And things are going okay. Again, house arrest sucks, but he did get, Hank and Hope in trouble because they aided and abetted, in theory, his assistance of Captain America. Now, because the government is terrible, which I agree with, they're chasing them down for no other reason than Scott used their technology to affect something. Which is also it's stupid. It's profoundly stupid ideologically and logically and every other way you can possibly think about it.
That's your one editorial, bud.
That's one of three. I'm back up to 3. I didn't editorialize almost at all on the last one when it came to just describing the plot.
I didn't realize you were stacking them.
No, I almost always get 3. You only gave me one last time because we would have been there forever. Anyway. So there was some zaniness because while playing with his daughters, Scott's leg goes through a fence and triggers his, alert. Again, it's played more for zany comedy than anything else. There's a fair amount of that.
It's also a setup to it happening 2 more times as the movie progresses.
Yeah, I've got minor issues with that, but that's a whole other thing. I can save that. But during his downtime, as he's waiting the last couple of days before he can get out from under house arrest, he is given a vision, a dream, a prophetic occurrence, wherein the mother of Hope and the wife of Hank, Janet van Dyne, sends him a message from the quantum realm, and he is then somewhat compelled to assist Hank and Hope as they are trying to rescue Janet from the quantum realm, and he's willing enough to go along, try to mend some fences for being a colossal screw-up. But nothing ever quite goes right. We are then introduced to the character of Ghost, who can phase in and out of reality as having her molecular structure torn apart and rewoven on a fairly regular basis and is slowly becoming more and more unstable and will eventually just kind of separate into the ether. And she believes that she can capture the quantum energy that Janet is giving off and then then siphon it into her to reverse the damage that was done during a scientific experiment, because it's science. It's always science gone wrong. So we also meet along the way Laurence Fishburne, who's just Laurence Fishburne.
He's supposed to be Goliath, but meh.
Look, when he grows, we can talk about him being Goliath. At the moment, he's Laurence Fishburne. Who is an estranged former colleague of Hank Pym, but Hank's got a giant ego, and they just kind of clashed repeatedly. They are able to... There's hijinks because things shrink and things grow. They also encounter Walton Goggins, mostly just being Walton Goggins, who wants to steal the technology that Hank has developed because money.
Money.
There's a bit of a game of hot potato. They finally send Hank through into the quantum realm where he finds Janet as there's a chase and a race against the clock going on. And we can talk about the specifics of the setup, but it's... I mean, we can get into... It's utterly irrelevant to the plot. You know, in most heist movies, the stuff is relevant to the plot. Not so much here. Again, there's a subplot where Scott is trying to get a security consulting film getting off the ground with his buddy Michael Peña. It's not going well because Michael Peña. There's a bit about him constantly getting out from being under house arrest and having to get back before he is sent away for another 20 years. Again, you have the somewhat sympathetic villain in the form of Ghost who just wants the pain to stop, don't you understand? And you have, again, Walton Goggins who just wants the money. And all these swirling, quasi-coherent plot threads eventually coalesce into a mostly happy ending. When Janet is rescued, she uses her magic quantum powers to temporarily heal Ava. Ava and Laurence Fishburne, or Ghost and Laurence Fishburne go on the run because he's not leaving her, don't you understand? Assumed emotional connection rather than actually shown emotional connection. Scott is free from house arrest. He's now just on probation. The Pym clan is reunited, those still on the run. But Hope and Scott kind of get back together. Scott's becoming a better father figure. They start collecting quantum healing particles, apparently.
Yep, that's the thing.
That's just a profoundly stupid thing. Which they were going to use to stabilize Ava, but as Scott is in the quantum realm collecting these things, and before he can be brought back by the technology on the other end, because you have to use the quantum portal. There's a joke in this. There's a joke made in this actual movie about, do you just put quantum in front of other words? And I feel like that was not a joke that was intended to be a spoken line of dialogue in this film, so much as it was one of the writers looked at everyone and said, or like a somewhat consulted, scientist looked at them and said, do you just put quantum in front of everything? That's not how any of this works. And they just said, hey, that's a funny line. We'll have Paul Rudd say it. Anyway, as he is stuck in the quantum realm collecting these things, the effects of the snap take hold, and Hank, Hope, and Janet all disintegrate, stranding him in the quantum realm, which was so great. And that's where things leave. Okay, again, this is so weird because it's a, almost 2-hour film, but almost nothing happens. This is such an oddly constructed bit of film. And I do want to talk about that a little bit, but Mark, before we go any further, is there anything that you felt because again, I skipped a lot. Again, it's a 2-hour film. I just summarized it unbelievably quickly. Is there anything you felt I overlooked that you want to touch on before we get into the kind of the nuts and bolts here?
No. I mean, everything kind of coalesces around... The whole movie leads up to and then coalesces around rescuing Janet from the quantum realm. It's a good chunk of the movie. It's definitely a good chunk of the final act. You have... And essentially, the final act is one long chase scene, and a lot of misdirection. It's as you said, it's a game of hot potato. So no, I don't think you necessarily did a disservice to the movie. I think you pretty much summed it up. As for my thoughts on it, I took my daughter to the double feature of Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp. With part of which was I wanted to go on a daddy-daughter date with my daughter, and I thought that, and we had already seen the original Ant-Man, so I thought this one was a good one for her to see again, if you're going to do a science fiction double feature. But I definitely had been wanting to see Ant-Man again. I know we talked about the troubled production on it. We talked about Edgar Wright leaving it and how uneven of a film it is. How it definitely felt a little cut and paste, not as nearly as cut and paste of two different films than Justice League was, but you can definitely feel the absence of Edgar Wright in certain places, and and the notes of Kevin Feige and whatnot as the film progressed. Obviously Edgar Wright didn't write a scene where Ant-Man tries to rob the Avengers compound and whatnot.
Yeah, we mentioned that at the time that I think the primary difference between that and Justice League is Ant-Man was patchwork. You had a bunch of guys with different scenes that had written different things that were then cut and put together in a way that feels patchwork. Then you had Justice League, which was a mess, a catastrophic, unsalvageable mess.
It was two people,
with the exception of one scene.
I was going to say,
Superman laying the smackdown on the entire Justice League single-handedly was hilarious and awesome.
Well, essentially, Ant-Man wasn't necessarily two different movies being shot and pasted together like Justice League was. But I don't want to revisit Justice League. I really don't want to revisit Ant-Man. The only excitement for me going into Ant-Man and the Wasp was at least this would be a coherent vision under one director who gladly took the notes from Marvel Studios and did what he was asked to do. So I was curious to see what that would look like. With that being said,
turns out not much.
Well,
it's weird because it's not bad, right?
Well, hang on.
I think we can both
let me say my piece.
Okay. Sorry.
Because one of the comments that was mentioned about Ant-Man and the Wasp from the reviews was, and I've seen this in a few different places, was after sort of the tragic ending of Infinity War, and this is going to be the last Marvel movie, the last Marvel Studios movie of the year until next February when Captain Marvel comes out, and Captain Marvel is set in the 90s, So Infinity War really is the last stop. No one's going to know anything that happens going any further in the Marvel Universe until... There's a rumor out there that it's called Endgame. I'm going to call it Avengers Forever. That's because I'm hoping that's the title, and seeing as they're kind of copying from that particular storyline. But be that as it may, Avengers 4... we have a little less than a year until Avengers 4 comes out, and the comment that keeps getting made is that Ant-Man and the Wasp is kind of a nice palate cleanser, and the way I'm looking at it is this: as great as Infinity War was, it definitely has a heady ending, heady, heavy, depressing, tragic.
Right.
Well done. But I think when you think about the summer blockbuster, you don't necessarily think about Universal Armageddon and half your loved ones being turned into cigarette ash. I don't know.
I do. I don't know what you consider a summer blockbuster. But no, wait, I do. It's all shit.
Okay. If you could have some self-control for just a moment.
Sorry. I'm slightly sleep deprived and overly caffeinated to compensate. So
terrific. This is the close we're going to get to Robert on Coke. Anywho,
if you mean Coca-Cola, I am drinking some right now. Look, the hardest thing I ingest is cherry Coke. That's about it.
It's not helping. The point being that for everyone except for Robert Winfrey, who's shaking his fist at the world, for the rest of us humans, you don't necessarily, as great as the Avengers was, you don't necessarily go to the movies to go to a summer blockbuster, to be specific, to see that kind of an ending. And so it was kind of nice for most of us mortals to go to see Ant-Man in the movie and just have a fun time. Like, and just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, or some specificity, after leaving Infinity War the first time, I wasn't real ecstatic about the idea of bringing either of my kids to it. You know, I mean, when it comes on DVD and our Blu-ray and we can watch it at home, that's one thing. But, you know, for the 7 and the 4-year-old, I was like, I don't know about this one. This one they might need to be a little bit older for. Perfect age for Ant-Man and the Wasp. This was like Marvel's take on a Disney movie. This is Honey, I Shrunk the Kids with laser beams. This was this was a fun, frenetic superhero story that, and for some people, to its detriment, was just made for children. It's funny. I think about like Thor Ragnarok, and Thor Ragnarok was a very silly movie. I actually had my daughter watch it with me a couple of days ago.
Please tell me she hated it. I want to have hope for the future.
No, she thought it was fine. If it makes you feel better, my son fell asleep with my son fell asleep within the first 5 minutes of it.
Your son's 4.
Look,
here's the weird thing about the development of, and I mean, you're a mental health professional. You are loosely familiar with the literature here. By the time your kid is 4, you have done everything within your power to socialize them, because like by the time they're 3.5, it's done. You cannot reliably influence socialization, openness, etc., after that age. It's done. 90 again, like you're just kind of there. That is the most important, in many respects, developmental point in your child's life. But you don't see the actual fruits of it from a how we interact with other humans type of perspective until they're about 8 to 10. So you're in this weird nebulous place with your kid where you have screwed them up as much as you're going to screw them up, generally speaking, but you won't actually know how badly for another 4 years.
So the point that I was trying to get to is that if you're looking for light summer fare, some fun action, some superheroes doing super fun stuff, and a villain who you more feel sorry for than you do want to see get beaten, Ant-Man and the Wasp was the movie for you. A great time was had by all, even though in the after credits scene we're back to, oh shit. Actually, since my daughter hadn't seen Infinity War, she just nudged me and went, I don't get it, what just happened? And I had to explain to her the plot of Infinity War. But things I liked, Paul Rudd's affable, he's fun. Here's the thing about Paul Rudd, and this is what Robert and I have talked about a bunch of times, is the emasculation of men on film and in television. All men must be dumb, all men must rely on women to get them out of the pickles that they're in.
Here's the reality of it. There's no reason, in many respects, for the man to be present apart from the nebulous excuse of work and providing, which is also frequently done better by the woman. If you look at, again, like sitcoms or a lot of dramas even. Like, if you watch them with anything approaching a rational thought in your head, you kind of wind up at, you don't serve a purpose, why are you here?
Yeah. What I like about the way they've written Scott Lang is that, yes, he goofs up, yes, he's in many ways like we talked about on source material with Ant-Man by Nick Spencer. He's a guy who's down on his luck, but he's trying to make good. He's actually a halfway decent fella. Sometimes he makes a bad decision, but that's kind of life. We all make bad decisions sometimes. That doesn't necessarily make us bad people. So he's probably the most relatable superhero going right now, as far as the modern Marvel universe, Marvel Cinematic Universe folks, superheroes. Scott Lang is you. Scott Lang is me. Scott Lang, is the everyman. And I like
until we get the Hawkeye movie, yeah.
And so that's what I like, and that's one of the things I liked about Ant-Man and the Wasp is, sure, they give Evangeline Lilly a lot. and they definitely make her a competent superhero. My daughter, add another chick superhero to the list of favorites on my daughter's list. She, the first question out of her mouth was, "When can I get a comic book with the Wasp in it?" And I'm not going to give her the one where Hank Pym punches her in the jaw or anything. But we'll find something suitable for her.
Come on! You don't want to teach your 7-year-old more about domestic violence than she already knows.
No, it can wait. She'll have plenty of time to learn.
Or the fractured psyche of Hank Pym and its degeneration into Yellow Jacket and other characters.
Plenty of time to learn that when she goes to college. Anyway, so the point that I'm getting to is that between the way they wrote Hope van Dyne and the way they wrote Scott, there's a nice balance between the two. I don't feel Scott's emasculated in any way on film. I don't feel like they made Hope van Dyne a Mary Sue.
Nice change for Evangeline Lilly, actually, after her last couple of roles when she was just a Mary Sue.
If we're referring to The Hobbit, again, debatable, but...
No, there is not... hang on. There's a significant difference between a character having a bit of emotional depth, which you can have a Mary Sue that has emotional depth. She was still a Mary Sue. Almost as bad of a Mary Sue as Rey from Star Wars, but that's a whole other story.
You're a terrible human being. Anyway.
No, I'm an accurate reflection of what I consume.
We've discussed both at length. I'm not doing this again. I don't want to do another 2.5-hour podcast. Thank you very much. So, that being said, it's a thin plot. That's one of the not great things about it. But again, if you're not really looking for big, thick, extensive, complicated plot lines, then again, this is the movie for you. This is simply they got to do a thing. Ghost needs to do a thing. They don't necessarily want to cooperate with each other in the beginning. And then it's a race to get the thing done. And that's the movie. It's more about characters. It's more about relationships. The star of the movie is the special effects. The what they do with size and perception is fantastic in this. And it's a lot of fun. You can absolutely tell they looked back at Ant-Man and said, "All right, we need to, This is a case of more dinosaurs being a good thing." They looked back at Ant-Man. They clearly saw that there was a lot of fun with perspective and size in that movie, but there was so much world building and introduction of character and whatnot that they didn't have a lot of time to play with it. This whole movie plays with it. Some of the action sequences, and now you'll all know if you've listened to enough of my podcast, not a huge fan of kung fu fighting. Just guys punching each other isn't really that interesting to me. They took that concept and used the size element to perfection. There's a lot of fun to be had watching Hope van Dyne change size as she's beating the shit out of a car full of criminals. Watching the cars flip in the air or her shooting the size blaster at the Pez dispenser or the salt shaker. Some of the stuff that you've seen in the trailers, but be that as it may, all that stuff is fun, and it really made the movie move along kind of swiftly, and there was a lot of great visual stimuli. So overall, is it the best Marvel Cinematic Universe movie I've ever seen? It's better than average. So, solid B+.
You had I don't know. You're nice. Let me put it like that.
I mean, it's just... Again, if it wasn't branded Marvel Cinematic Universe and they just threw that out there cold, it would be average. It was an average family-friendly action movie. In fact, if I knew nothing about this movie, knew nothing about comics, I just woke up from a 40-year coma, and I've never read a comic book before, and they sat me, and the first thing they did is, as I woke up, was sit me down in front of this movie, I would have been like, "Oh, Disney made this. This is clearly a Disney movie. Somebody thought, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was really popular. What if we did it with superheroes?"
Was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids really all that popular?
Yes, it got a sequel.
It got 2, actually, but that's not the point.
It also got a theme park, or a theme park attraction.
Really?
Yes.
Huh. So, 6 months later, when they had how much? I wonder if they actually recouped, if they actually justified the expense of building said attraction when 6 months later they had to tear it down for something better.
No, it's still there.
Where?
Hollywood Studios in Florida.
Eh.
Though they may have torn it down because they got to rebuild They got to rebuild Star Wars everywhere, and Toy Story Land.
Well, no, Hollywood Studios is different.
Formerly MGM Studios, and no, you're thinking of Universal, different company.
Anyway, Mark's being nice to this movie.
Did you really think it was that bad? Like that was like that incompetently made of a movie?
It's just nothing.
Well, hang on. I don't think you're being particularly fair. I mean, again, let's look at all of the elements. Were there any bad performances? There were any objectively bad performances?
Goggins, Fishburne, chick who plays Ava.
They weren't believable people. They weren't believable in their roles. You didn't really? You thought so?
Yeah. There's a reason I will refer to them as their actors' names rather than their characters. There's nothing there. Okay, well, they didn't give Laurence Fishburne anything. They gave him a character name, but I'll agree with you. I don't necessarily think it was a bad performance. I just, you got to go with what you're written, and he was playing science guy, angry science guy. I didn't necessarily get taken out of the movie by his performance. Really? All right.
No, I'm really surprised you're being that critical.
Hang on. Since you brought that up, no, there was. Again, okay. So let me rephrase slightly. I dislike the writing. I think it's a mess.
Okay, talk to me about that.
You mentioned the frenetic pacing, which can be a good thing, especially when you have nothing, as you kind of have here. And you have, for some reason, 2 hours to fill. Filling it with somewhat interesting action sequences is a moderately acceptable way to do that. But there's, subplots that we don't need.
There were subplots? There was one plot. They needed to get... There were two plots, and they were working against one another. One was Hank wants to get his wife out of the quantum realm, and they need stuff to do it with. And Ghost, who I forgot to mention in my initial thoughts on the movie, and Ghost needs to heal herself before she's torn asunder.
And Scott has house arrest issues, and Walton Goggins wants to steal it and sell it.
Oh, that's right.
And look, this movie, if you just get out of it, is probably fine. If you actually stop and think about it or watch it a second time, I imagine significant portions of it don't hold up. And again, where precisely do we lay the totality of blame for that? I don't know. I mean, again, I took issue with some of the writing. Now, there's still, which is not to say it's all bad, mind you. There's some good stuff here. There's some decent action sequences. Some of it drags a bit. I mean, the whole thing where she steals the component part after, which they almost refer to as the component because it sounds science-y rather than actually write something out. But the scene where she gets that from Walton Goggins, it just drags. I get that they're showing off the capabilities of Evangeline Lilly's character, but I felt that could have been shaved. We don't need as much of it as take place in the main ballroom. We don't need the joke of him yelling at them to stop shooting his chandelier. That could have all been significantly trimmed down. There's one too many driving bits. I'm not sure which one I'd cut, but it felt like one too many, and it just hit the same note a bit too much for me. What was the other thing? I mean, you're always complaining about writing that tells rather than shows, and there was a lot of telling rather than showing here when it came to the actual narrative. And I feel that was a bit of a goes to a detriment. Again, this is not a bad movie. I'm taking kind of the opposite stance of Mark here, partially because I just want to take the opposite stance, not entirely. Again, I believe these are fair issues that I'm bringing up. But again, this is not bad. You just really need to make sure you know what you're getting into, and it's a fair amount of rinse and repeat. Who's got the shrunken laboratory? Who's going where? Again, it's just a lot of the same, and you're really kind of relying on the humor and the personalities involved to kind of carry over the writing deficiencies and some of the pacing issues. And the question, so again, to what degree is it successful? I would argue a little bit less successful than Mark has portrayed it, but still a solid overall effort by all parties. That's not the right way to say that. It's still a solidly an overall film. I'm okay with it. It's not to my personal tastes necessarily, and a lot of that is and maybe that's overly coloring this, but if you take issue with anything I've brought up objectively, I'm prepared to entertain that I'm being overly colored by the fact that I don't like fluff.
I think that's a lot of it. I honestly think that you're being excessively negative because this isn't your cup of tea, and you're having a rare thing for you, as a matter of fact, where you can't separate your disinterest in something from its objective quality. I really think you're being ridiculous.
Which part?
Well, performances I'm kind of stuck on right now, and I.
All right, let's set those aside. Let's say for the moment that I'm struggling to separate the performance from the writing. So, for the sake of argument, let's set aside performances. I'm prepared to accept. I am prepared to accept that the performances, the premise. I'm prepared to accept your premise that the performances were all adequate to above adequate, and the writing is coloring my perception of them. I will potentially accept that premise. I'm still not sure what part of the writing you can necessarily defend as such.
I think the writing where it works is in the dynamic between the characters. I admitted from the start that it's a thin plot. And I didn't even, and it's so thin I didn't even remember half of what the subplots were. You're absolutely right about that.
There's literally a scene in this movie where the ghost character becomes too aggravated by Michael Peña to remain stealthy and proceeds to beat the crap out of everyone in the room. I sympathized as that scene kept going on.
Well, the point that I was getting to was, I think that not enough of the plot even registered with me as plot. So maybe the worst part about the movie might be the writing of the plot, but the writing of the characters and their dynamics I thought again was good to great.
I genuinely wonder how much of that was improv.
And that's fine.
Given the weakness of the overall writing, the fact that these characters interact as well as they do, I genuinely wonder, if that's either improv or was significantly rewritten on set.
But let's take some of these relationships and really examine them. You have Scott and Hank, and they provide a great amount of subtext. And I like the fact they kept referring to Germany, and how that affected Hank. Hank had to go on the run. His whole life got turned upside down. Because when we meet Hank the first time, all he wants is to make sure that his Ant-Man technology isn't going to be turned into a weapon that can fall into the wrong hands and be placed in a situation where it gets out of control. That is the entire premise of Ant-Man. If Darren
from Hank's perspective.
Hit it, Darren. If Darren doesn't create the Yellow Jacket, there is no Ant-Man movie. Hank Pym just goes on living. You know, him and his daughter go on having an estranged relationship, and we never hear from Janet again. Okay? There is no movie without that particular instance. And when it was over, Hank was singularly focused on wanting to get Janet out of the quantum realm. And Scott, through his own, some might say, selfish actions, and not thinking about what the repercussions of essentially fighting the government, fighting at that point what was the Avengers, becoming, for all intents and purposes, a terrorist, how that affected Hank, how that, by extension, affects Janet, how it affected Hope, how it affected his daughter. You know, and it's like, from Scott, and Scott talks about, like, you know, from his perspective, he thought he was doing the right thing. Captain America called on him, and he believed in what Captain America was doing. And everybody else around him is going, yeah, that's fine if you live in a bubble by yourself. These are all things that happen.
That's also fine if we're not dealing with massive governmental overreach. I mean, again, there's a reason I brought up the specific point that the technology that Hank had created and provided, being used by someone else, is now somehow enough of a reason to track this man down and arrest him. It's profoundly stupid.
Okay, I'm not going to argue with you about that. I don't...
No, you sold this guy a gun and he used it for a negative purpose. You must, not only must you who sold it to him be one that be
you know what, though? You can call that profoundly stupid, but there are people who absolutely think that's a solid argument.
And they are profoundly stupid people.
Yes, but those people currently are in government, among other places.
And how does that change the reality that they are profoundly stupid?
You're focused on, well, it's dumb. Yeah, but it is in fact a reality. There are people who think that. There are people who are trying to enact laws because of that philosophy. So it is a thing to deal with. It actually, I think, strengthens the movie, now that I'm thinking about it.
If they'd addressed it in any real way, then maybe.
Well, how much of that do you want them to address in what is essentially a kid's movie?
We don't need much. We just need something.
Why? They got the point across. This was technology that was government control, and it was used to destroy a plane in Germany.
It was never government controlled.
Okay, fair point.
Here's what I would have. Okay, since you brought it up specifically, I would have settled for a brief bit where Hank, in addition to being pissed off at Scott, is literally pissed off at the government and has to pay legal fees because he's trying to fight this while running from the FBI.
Okay. That might have made it stronger. I don't necessarily think it makes it weaker. The absence of it. But what I was talking about, though, was, again, the strength of the movie lies in the relationships and the dynamics between characters. So
sure, because there is literally nothing else of value.
But we've talked about that about other movies before, where we're willing to give them...
I said the same thing.
But no, we've talked about them with a lot less degree of harshness than what you're dishing out here.
Which one?
God, I hate when we play this game. My dad does the same thing. Give an example. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I literally walked into this argument 30 seconds ago.
All right.
The dynamic between Scott and Hope, where they obviously care about one another, but she's mad at him for what he's done and how it's affected them, et cetera, et cetera. You have the relationship between Scott and Cassie. So... And then you have the relationship between Foster and Ava. And I want to talk about Ava for a second because I feel like we have one of the more interesting villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe shortlist.
Whoa.
Well, now, hang on. Can I say something without you immediately disagreeing with me? You got.
I am curious as to how you justify that premise.
I said interesting, not good. Number one. Number two.
Is quasi sympathy what passes for interesting, and is that how... I mean, we've joked about how bad the villains in the MCU are, and they are bad. Is the fact that we have one that is portrayed in a somewhat sympathetic light rather than outright villainy, and strong enough to register as both interesting and high up on the scale?
Yes.
That is really the profoundly terrible depths that we have sunk to with this.
Yes. Next question.
She's still not good.
Hang on.
Like, she's not. She is. I don't even find her all that interesting.
All right.
To be quite honest.
I'm looking at the list of Marvel Cinematic Universe films, and
I don't want to. I mean,
no, hang on. I want to play this.
Too far into detail with this.
I want to play this game with you.
That are good.
Hang on. I want to play this game with you. Okay.
By all means.
Iron Man, the Ironmonger, wants to kill Tony and take over the company and sell weapons to people. Okay. Incredible Hulk.
We don't count the Incredible Hulk.
The guy who becomes the Abomination wants to be physically stronger. That's it. That was all that was going on with his character.
That is not. He is also not the primary villain. I would make a much more coherent argument that the primary antagonist is
Ross.
William Hurt's take on Ross, and Tim Roth's take on Emil Blonsky is just the weapon he chooses to use.
Okay, and all Ross wants to do is capture the Hulk.
Ross sucks too.
Okay, Iron Man 2.
That whole movie sucks. We don't count it.
Justin Hammer, who wants to sell weapons and have a bigger, better company than Tony Stark. And then you have Whiplash, who wants revenge on Iron Man for his family taking credit for this and that, and icing out his family.
To be fair, in a more tightly constructed movie, Whiplash is one of the better ones, but that whole movie gets bogged down in the middle.
Thor. Okay, you have Loki. Loki wants to rule. What is it? Asgard or the Earth? I don't remember which one in that particular case. Okay. Captain America: The First Avenger. The Red Skull wants to rule the world. Okay?
Everyone wants to rule the world.
Marvel's The Avengers. Loki wants to rule Earth. Iron Man 3. What's his face from AIM wants revenge on Tony for icing him out on a rooftop. That's it. That's that one. Thor: The Dark World. The elves want to destroy the universe. Moving on. Winter Soldier. Okay. As much as I honestly forget what the point of the villains was in this one. I just remember them being the most interesting.
Yeah, Alexander Pierce, the character played by Robert Redford, has a desire to exude governmental control through fear to preemptively destroy his enemies.
Oh, that's right. They wanted to kill half the people on Earth who were a threat to Hydra. Moving on. Guardians of the Galaxy. Ronan wants to kill all the Xandarians. Age of Ultron. Ultron wants to kill all the humans. Ant-Man. Darren Cross wants to make a weapon and sell it. Civil War.
Also going insane.
Civil War. Baron suddenly Zemo wants to tear apart the Avengers out of revenge. Doctor Strange. What's his face? I can't
Caecilius wants to join the Prime Material realm with the Dark Dimension ruled by Dormammu.
But why?
Because he's actually become horribly nihilistic after his children died and wished to enter...
He wants to destroy the world.
No, he does. He actually wants to preserve it.
Okay.
Perfectly. In time and amber for all eternity.
Terrific. Which would then destroy it. Ego just wants to live.
No, he wants to destroy he wants to absorb everything.
Yeah, Ego wants to become the universe. Therefore destroying it. Okay, the Vulture just wants to sell weapons.
The Vulture wants to keep his head above water financially.
Yeah, the Vulture might be the second most sympathetic villain in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. Hela wants to take over the 9 realms. Killmonger wants to become the king of Wakanda and give weapons to black people. And Thanos wants to wipe out half the universe. This is the first and most interesting character villain we've ever had in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't care what you say. Okay,
I say you're wrong.
No, well, you haven't heard the argument yet, Judge. Here we have a character who isn't motivated by any of what I just read to you. Okay, most of the villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe either want to take over the world or they want to destroy it. They want to kill lots of people. This one isn't interested in any of that. This one is interested in staying alive. The closest we've got here is the Vulture. Okay? Now, the fact that... I'll give you this. They don't flesh her out much beyond that. But I thought that was it. But I don't know about you, or if your life has ever been threatened. But trying to stay alive is a pretty compelling character trait, in my opinion. And I think
sure. It's so compelling. It's universal.
Well, the point being that there isn't a whole lot of time or energy spent in getting to know her any further when she's a few days shy of not existing anymore, and so it's a race to save this woman. That I thought was interesting. The little bit of backstory they gave her, and her desire to save herself amidst everything else that's going on. I will agree with you. Not particularly the strongest thing I've ever seen captured on film, but I used the word interesting because at least this is the first time in 18 or 20 movies, this is the first time I've seen it done in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This was the first original take on a villain I've seen in X amount of movies, and I think that bears repeating. Okay,
so you lower the bar enough and you can get over it. Okay.
I don't see that. I don't see how that. I said that that's lowering the bar. I said for the first time.
No.
They took an interesting take on the character.
You went over what a giant crap show the list is, and now so this is the first one that's somewhat interesting. When it's a giant crap show, it's not that hard to be something better than a giant crap show. You're clearing at an unbelievably low bar.
Okay.
And my bar has not shifted because we're talking about the MCU. I believe in objective quality.
Okay. I'm giving more credit. I'm giving her and the character more credit because of the novelty in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which maybe I'm wrong for doing so. I'll take that. But it didn't bother me nearly as much as you did. It did you, rather.
If the perspective that we're going to discuss is that narrow, then
what do you want me to fucking compare her to?
She's probably top 5.
Who do you want me to compare this character to? Every villain in the history of film?
Sure.
That's okay. By comparison, most of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in comparison to the history of film, is kind of terrible, Rob. That I don't think that's a fair comparison.
Which we've already established. Look, we've said that. I'm not going to necessarily adjust everything because they're terrible. No, they're all terrible, and this one is slightly less terrible.
I swear to God, going into the show, I didn't think we'd have a lot to talk about. We're at this now for an hour. And we are having an Age of Extinction style argument over Ant-Man and the Wasp. Dude, if I were somebody else, I'd beat us both up and shove us both in lockers.
That's because you resort to violence to solve your problems.
You know what I'm saying. We've really beat the subject to death. We need to move on.
All right, let me go with this then. It is a markedly different take on the antagonist than the MCU has gone with to this point.
Yes.
That is true. I believe there are fundamental errors of execution, and I also don't believe that different just for the sake of being different is in any way laudable, but it is different. And I would further say there is an interesting character probably in there somewhere that a better written movie could have gotten to.
Okay, I agree with that.
We have reached consensus. Yay!
What's your fucking problem with Walton Goggins?
Whoa. As an actor or as this character?
He was a thief. He was Sonny Birch.
As an actor or as this character?
What? Again, objectively speaking, what was wrong with his performance? I certainly did not think he was
okay, hang on. Let me think. But you didn't think of him as Shane?
Well, my point is, no,
I know it. I know exactly what my problem with this was. Somebody saw him in his role as a trans woman, so a man trying to transition into a woman, from Sons of Anarchy, and said, "Do that, but without the boobs."
Okay. Since I've never watched Sons of Anarchy, I don't know how to respond to that.
Okay, on a slightly more serious note, because actually his character in that is unbelievably meek. And I'm not going to say that. Anyway, to the actual... okay, since this got brought up, my issue with his performance... This is probably another issue that's more of writing than it is his performance, necessarily. I feel like they wrote a horribly... they wrote the stupid character to try and flesh things out, or to try and pad out their runtime rather than actually, address what they already had. They hired Walton Goggins. Walton Goggins got on scene and said, "This character's terrible. How about I do a Southern accent?" And they said, "Great, it's a much better character now."
Okay.
I mean, again, my issue with his performance is more that... All right, I'm going to limit this to the writing then, because I've seen Walton Goggins actually act. I know he is capable of more. This is a stupidly written character that they probably should have just excised. If you want to have a brief thing where he sells them a component, fails miserably, and then just decides to hell with this, there's shrinking magical people coming after it. No. All right, you know what? You gave me my money for this. You are clearly more trouble than it's worth, even with the money I've been offered. I'm out. That would have been more acceptable to me, because everything after that is just... Again, and this is an issue of writing, not an issue of him, of the actor necessarily. They just didn't want only the Pyms or Ghost playing hot potato. They felt they needed a third person in there to play hot potato with. So they manufactured his continued involvement. It's...
Rumor has it his involvement in the movie is leading to something else that he's... I understand what you're saying. What he did in the movie was they probably could have cut out, and it wouldn't have affected the movie in any real way, other than giving the Wasp a fight scene in the beginning to introduce her character.
And you could still have that. My issue is more everything after that.
Yeah, that he continued to exist in the movie. But from what I've been reading, I think Sonny Birch is an allusion to something else, and I don't remember what it was. I'd have to read it again. Just as we're talking about this, I was curious about something, because I had the Wikipedia page up to go through that list of villains. But so here's the Rotten Tomatoes critical. Here's the list of all the movies by their Rotten Tomatoes scores. Top of the list, Black Panther. Bottom, Thor: The Dark World, 66%. Somewhere in the middle, Ant-Man and the Wasp at 86%.
All right, again, that's not where I would have landed necessarily, but I mean, while we're discussing this again, we're not actually that far apart. If you were to okay, if I told you, give me, a score out of 100, and then I were to say, no, it's you're probably 85, I think you said, so yeah. B+. I'm probably closer to 77 to 80.
So if you were to compare that to the Rotten Tomato scores, you said you gave. So I'm going to go.
I take serious umbrage with a lot of the aggregates that have been drawn with some of these movies. You know that. Okay, so just for shits and giggles, since it was mentioned, I said 85. That puts it between where it actually is at 86% and Guardians of the Galaxy 2. As far as actual movies, it's between Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Using your 77 score, is that what you said? Is that what you said? 77? 79. It's
right.
Pretty close.
All right. So at 79, it equals Captain America: The First Avenger. It sits between Thor and Iron Man 3.
Yeah, that's probably fair, but again, we've had this discussion where it's okay, here's the list of Marvel Cinematic Universe movies ranked according to the Rotten Tomatoes aggregate, and you and I both agree that 2/3 of it is fundamentally erroneous.
Yeah, they've got Avengers Infinity War between just above Ant-Man and just under Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 at 83%.
And they've got Thor Thor Ragnarok like in the top 5. It's stupid.
Yeah, it's in the top 3. It's
Again.
Black Panther, Iron Man, Ragnarok, Avengers, and Homecoming.
Yeah, again, like we've had this discussion and we know those are crap.
Okay. I feel like we've had an entertaining enough screaming match. Boy, of all the movies you and I get into screaming matches about, did you think at any time we were going to get into a screaming match over Ant-Man and the fucking Wasp?
Once I saw it, I kind of figured.
Really? Tell me why.
This is the type of movie that you effusively praise relative to its actual quality, and I consequently take a more realistic view of, and we wind up screaming about it. We wind up screaming over 5 percentage points.
I feel like there's an insult in there. I feel like I was just insulted.
No. Look, because the reverse is true. There are movies that I effusively praise relative to their objective quality that you then take a more realistic stance over and wind up screaming at each other over 5 percentage points. It happens.
Did we scream about Blade Runner? Because I don't remember. I remember hating it. I just don't remember screaming about it.
I don't scream that much when it's... I don't scream as much defending things as you do defending things. I scream more attacking them because I think your point... Because like it's just weird in the sense that the way we relate to each other when discussing these things, when I'm more defending them, I don't get as loud. Consequently, you don't get as loud. When you're defending them, you tend to get loud, so I get loud.
Ah. Fair enough.
Which is not a reflection of the quality of your defense. You have raised very, very cogent points. None of them were about Age of Extinction, but you have raised them in the past.
You're a dick. All right.
Again, you raised some here that I don't disagree with you, and that made me rethink. Okay, is this the acting or the writing? And it might be the acting, but I'm more inclined to blame the writing necessarily because there's nothing. If the actors are only given so much to act, how much can I really get mad at them? I feel like Walton Goggins was given lines of dialogue, and you're a black market technology dealer, and he said, "Well, can I have a southern accent and a farm to table high-end restaurant because I need something to do. This character needs something more than this." And they went, "Sure, here's a partial writing credit."
So you know how we were talking about, hey, what do you think that next Marvel movie is going to be in 2020? Yeah, it's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It's already been listed, just without a date.
Okay.
It's listed as a year, but not a date. All right, let me take a deep breath here, deep cleansing breath.
Hang on. There's 2 things I want to say briefly about the end of this movie.
Right, well, unless it's really ridiculous, I'm not going to argue with you just for the sake of time.
All right. I'm going to say something really ridiculous just so you argue with me now.
Are you lonely tonight? Is that the problem here? You don't want to let me go off this phone call?
I mean, yes, I'm always lonely. I'm a profoundly lonely human being. That's not influencing my desire to do this. There's 2 parts to that. Let me be just because you all might have gathered this now, given my personal proclivities. I liked the ending. I really did. I actually would have had both his daughter and Evangeline Lilly evaporate while they were watching movies together. That genuinely would have been how I wrote that. And I also want to say that of the people that I stayed to watch, until the very end with, because that's what you do. So we got the stupid, ant playing the computerized drum set over the reality that half of the population is now gone. I actually kind of really liked that because it was a little bit humorous, but it's like a microcosm of the whole movie. It's moderately amusing, set over the backdrop of this horrible, horrible circumstance. Which is, again, kind of what Ant-Man and the Wasp is. It's a sort of light-hearted pseudo-distraction from the fact that it's all gone. That we are then reminded of at the very end. My favorite thing about that is actually the very last thing, because they always do this with these end credit scenes. They would do the old, so-and-so will return. I love the one they did with Avengers Infinity War, because they didn't say anyone would return except Thanos. Just Thanos will return. We get to the end of this one, and it's Ant-Man and the Wasp will return with a question mark at the end.
Right.
Which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, let me kind of give my 2 cents here on this, and this is absolutely personal preference. This is not in any way a knock on the film one way or the other. But I had been reading, and this is what gets you into trouble. I had been reading that
next thing you know, you'll be thinking.
I fucking hate you.
That's just the logical outcome of reading, and I know that's not to imply you're not a thinking person.
I have a headache. So I had been reading that Ant-Man and the Wasp was going to directly tie into the resolution of Avengers Infinity War, which has been leaked, alluded to, guessed that it's going to have to deal with time travel. For those that don't know, and again, I don't have any special connections. I got this from a movie YouTube page that deals in Reddit and leaks and innuendo and trades like Variety and Deadline and all that. But the guess, we'll call it at this point, the assumption is that Avengers 4 picks up several years later with people sort of living in the aftermath of the snap, and that they will use Scott Lang's ability to manipulate the quantum realm or enter the quantum realm as a means of time travel. And through that means of time travel, they will intercept the Infinity Stones before what we'll call, just to move this conversation on, the Thanos quest, the Infinity Quest. And so they'll essentially be a second gauntlet that is the sum total of several different alternate timelines. One is, I think, a timeline when the Guardians don't get together. Another is a timeline where Scott Lang is fighting in the Battle of New York, etc., etc. I won't get into any more details than that. It's not really necessary for the conversation. But I was hoping that the final scene would not be something we already knew could possibly happen and doesn't really tell us anything, in that Hope, Janet, and Hank all disappear, presumably into the Soul Gem. That's everyone's guess. That's where all the ashes ended up, all the ash people. But that rather, sometime later, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers knock on Hank Pym's door or Scott Lang's door and says, "Hey, we need your, we've heard you're able to enter the quantum realm, and the quantum realm allows for time travel. We need your help." And boom, we're done. That's what I was hoping for. I was hoping to have that kind of a stronger connection to the next Avengers movie. We got no connection. If I didn't know that they were, or look at the set photos where Scott Lang is in the Battle of New York, or read about this stuff, I would have no clue what any of the quantum realm stuff or how or why it would even connect to Avengers 4. So I'm left at the end of that movie. So forgetting all of that for just a moment, you stay to the end, through the end credits, and kind of like the last Guardians movie, outside of the allusion to Adam Warlock, you're like, okay, this doesn't tell me anything about the next chapter. That's kind of the fun for me of the after credit scenes, is you get a little taste of what's to come, a little taste of. I mean, occasionally they do something silly like the shawarma scene, stuff like that. But what I want to see,
talking about patience.
Yeah, what I want to see in these movies is Thanos going into his wardrobe and grabbing a gauntlet to put the Infinity Stones on. I want to see allusions to the next film. Something, what was great about the first four Marvel movies was each one had a snippet of what the next one was going to be. And to some degree, they continued that into Phase 2. And then as Phase 3 has gone on, that doesn't seem to be happening as much or at all. And I miss it. The after credit scenes aren't really fun for me anymore because they're just sort of there doing nothing.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you at all on that.
I booed. I actually got up and booed.
I was more okay with this one in the sense that how do I say this? It reestablished where things are in the universe for these characters, because all we knew was that this took place between the two events, between Civil War and Infinity War. Somewhere in that space we have now Ant-Man and the Wasp. We now know exactly where the characters are at the end of Infinity War. And again, look, they're saving their big, juicy post-credit scene for Captain Marvel anyway.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, I dislike your idea. I like it. I like that there could have been something. I mean, it's actually kind of to the point where I now imagine the post-credit scene for Captain Marvel is Captain Marvel finding that equipment on whatever roof they're on, bringing Scott out and going, yeah, you can manipulate time down there. This is kind of important. I need your help. And this didn't go so well last time someone named Captain asked me for help.
I just taking a guess here, and then we'll move into the money. You're probably right about that. You probably Captain Marvel probably answers the beeper from the end of Infinity War, which was an after credit scene I actually did like. And you're probably right. She probably does something along the lines of kind of looking at what's there, fiddling with it, and out comes Scott out of the quantum realm, and saying something to him to the effect of where have you been? And he's like, not where, when. Boom. End of scene.
Yeah.
They again. I don't know how much of Infinity War is going to be establishing that the quantum realm is good for time travel, when that didn't really get established in this movie. And I don't really want them to spend that much time on it. I want the movie to open and that and them going, we have a plan. We got to get going, and let's get to the time travel already. Get the kids to the mall. I feel like this is going to be 2 hours, and the first half hour is going to be establishing. Did you know he could time travel? No. And then I'm going to want to hit my head in the seat in front of me. So I thought that was kind of a missed opportunity to take care of that all at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp. But I don't know.
I would have accepted even just kind of a not completely mediocre, but a brief line of dialogue from Janet talking about the unstable nature of time once you get to the quantum.
I would have liked that they have just
honestly,
showed it.
No. Here's how I would have done this, mind you. I would not have had her be the same age that Hank Pym is. I would have had this be something where she is aware of the chronological disparity, but she only aged 5 years.
Yeah, I mean,
she
granted,
knows time flows differently, and here's a very clear indicator of it. She's still young and attractive, while he's Michael Douglas.
I mean, granted, she's 1970.
I mean, they digitally de-aged her for the opening bit. They're going to spend a lot of money making Samuel L. Jackson 25 years younger for Captain Marvel. She's not in the movie that long. You could have done it.
Yeah, I mean, granted, she's 60 years old, and so I think they just sort of went with the lazy route of, all right, come out and be 60. That's fine. But I'll tell you what, I'm just looking at some of her credits here. She didn't even look like herself in Wizard of Lies. The things they can do with the movies, man. She is... I
have not heard of this movie.
It was an HBO movie about Bernie Madoff. She plays Ruth Madoff. And I honestly did not realize that was her. They had done so much. They done so much with her hair and makeup, and she uses crazy New York accent. But that being said, yeah, I would have almost liked it if she had come out and she hadn't aged at all. You know, she came out the age that she went in, which I would have thought was, which I thought would have been interesting, and it would have alluded to the time travel thing. I also would have liked to have seen, and maybe it was a matter of time, but
now, to be fair, we might also be horribly wrong about the importance of, this is all based on wild speculation.
Yeah.
This
whole conversation is going to be a waste of time if it turns out time travel isn't the issue in Avengers 4.
Well, no, time travel will be the issue, but I feel like there are ways to potentially get at it without utilizing the quantum realm that way.
Mm-hmm.
It could easily just be that, Tony, 20 years now with gray hair and a beard and still suicidal, and fanatically trying to undo the fact that he cocked everything up, has realized that that time travel is theoretically possible. What he needs is something from the quantum realm,
mm-hmm.
some specific anomaly that exists only there after, finding Hank Pym's research, and that's kind of the catalyst. So instead of it being a feature of the quantum realm, it is simply something that he needs access to refine. I mean, they have quantum healing particles. Why not quantum chronological particles?
Yeah, it might just be as simple as with quantum particles, we can power a time machine.
Yeah.
And that's that. So.
And the fact that he's holding healing particles is immaterial. They come from the quantum realm. We haven't invented, Mr. Fusion yet, so we still need the actual plutonium.
All right, are we ready to move on?
Yeah. Let's talk about money.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, 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 money.
Dollar.
I am absolutely exhausted from this review so far. All right.
It's only going to get worse.
Ant-Man and the Wasp, on a budget of $162 million, is currently sitting at $168 million, according to the chart that I'm looking at on Box Office Mojo. It made $82 million domestic and $85 million foreign. I don't know. It was the number one movie of the weekend, obviously. I'm not entirely sure if it's gonna, where it's gonna land. I don't know. I'm not really sure where it's tracking with numbers like this, but
what's it got to contend with coming out?
Oh, let's look at the old calendar. This week is Skyscraper.
Not much of a. How do I say this? If Skyscraper is designed to be as comedic and kid-friendly as Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's going to fail hard, so that won't be an issue. If it's not designed to be that way, there's not a lot of overlap in terms of the market share, the audience.
I don't know what's coming out on the 20th, but nothing that I've marked. So let's move on. Mission Impossible Fallout comes out on the 27th. Christopher Robin's on the 3rd.
So for lighthearted children's fare, it's got a few weeks of not much competition.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's competitive with it is and I've already seen it because I did the Amazon Prime preview, was Hotel Transylvania 3.
I mean, that whole series just kind of makes me sad. I know people who love it, and when we revealed, I still haven't seen 1. Like, I reviewed 2 because you made me. I said my piece about it, positive and negative, and I will do the same to 3, though I imagine at this point it's going to wind up being even more negative because they're running out of ideas.
You don't have to see 3. It's not on the schedule.
It's not? Oh, no, we have something else in its place. I was so happy, actually, when I saw it. Comes out the same week as something else. Like, yay!
Yeah, Skyscraper.
Oh, okay, so hang on then. Okay, so that's going to be its primary competition, I imagine, but we're also dealing with the smaller children who are entertained by the bright colors and flashing lights of Hotel Transylvania 3 versus the slightly older kids who are probably more interested in the frenetic pacing and I hate to say this as condescendingly as this is going to come out, but can feel grown up watching Ant-Man and the Wasp.
No, it's not condescending at all. Anyway, so
how sarcastic were you being there?
Quite. So
Okay.
I figure with it being the middle of the summer, not a whole lot of competition. Probably between 500 and 700 million. I don't think it goes much past 700 million though.
I'd be surprised if it got to 700. In all honesty,
Yeah, I'm
I
figuring.
mean, it'll probably wind up in and around the top 10, but
It's but
probably
it's,
not top 5.
I was gonna say, yeah. It I think it makes to around 500 million and just stops there. I'm giving it a parameter of to 700 million to be on the safe side, but I don't think it gets that far. Here's how the weekend went. For the July 6th through the 8th, Ant-Man and the Wasp debuted at number 1, no shock there. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom went from 1 to 2, Incredibles 2 to 3. The first Purge, which actually came out on July 4th, debuted at number 4. Sicario 2 fell from 3 to 5. Uncle Drew 4 to 6. Ocean's 8 5 to 7. Tag 6 to 8. Won't You Be My Neighbor actually went up from 10 to 9, which
It's
is
being released in more theaters.
yeah. I was just about to say that it got released in 239 more theaters. Deadpool 2 fell from 7 to 10. Something called Sanju fell from 8 to 11. Whitney debuted at number 12. Solo fell out of the top 10 to 13. Hereditary 11 to 14. Avengers 12 to 15. Sorry to Bother You debuted at 16. 25. Three Identical Strangers 25 to 17. Superfly 13 to 18. Aw. Book Club 14
Why
to
did
19.
you awe about that?
Oh, those folks tried so hard. Leave No Trace 22 to 20.
Why don't you try better instead of trying harder? Just a thought.
And lastly, Rampage fell from 15 to 21. And there was 81 less theaters than the previous week. So there you go.
It's winding down. I mean, it's almost done. It'll be done in time for Skyscraper to come along, so The Rock is just in the box office all year.
As far as our worldwide grosses, again, to those people who wish Jurassic World would just die and go away, it's the number 3 movie in the world. It's already made over $1 billion.
Look, this is probably going to wind up at number 2. I have no problem believing it'll close over the $1.3 billion that Black Panther made.
Yeah, it's currently made more money than Black Panther did overseas at $727 million. If it makes
It's almost like the demographics in Black Panther were inherently limiting.
if it makes another $300 million alone just here in the United States, yeah, it's got Black Panther's number. So there we go. The Incredibles 2, I said it was going to make $1 billion. It's well on its way. It's currently at number 4 at $775 million. Deadpool 2, hooray for Fox, almost Disney. That's currently sitting at number 5 at $727 million. And you and I, get into some pretty heated arguments about, this and that. But I just want to say, to all the people out there who look at the state of cinema and go, why do we have to have all these comic book movies and sequels and franchise movies and all of this nonsense and cotton candy and stupidity? I just want to tell you that the top 5 movies are either sequels and or comic book movies. It's Avengers Infinity War, comic book. Black Panther, comic book, and sequel. Black Panther, comic book. Jurassic World, franchise sequel. Incredibles, superheroes and a sequel, and an animated movie. And Deadpool 2, comic book, sequel. I mean...
Guys, let me be clear about this. This is really easy. The critics said it years ago. The movie's bad, just don't go. If you're wondering why are we mired in this creative quagmire and being inundated with everything trying to franchise and tentpole and, oh crap, that failed miserably for us, now we have to sell to Disney. I mean, there's an economic reality here. I can complain about it creatively, and I do, when I think it's bad. But I yelled to high heaven about how bad Age of Extinction was. I never questioned why there was a sequel.
Or why it got made in the first place.
Yeah, no, that was never an issue for me. I knew why. Because money. Because they were financially successful. I yelled about the quality because they're terrible movies. I yelled at people who saw them because you're perpetuating this. But that's not the same as going, oh, God, why is there another Jurassic World movie? Because the last two have made $1 billion. Quite frankly, they'd be stupid not to make another one.
And then in sixth place is a movie about being in a video game, Ready Player One. Our Chinese Chinaman movies, Operation Red Sea and Detective Chinatown, have fallen to 7 and 8, finally out of the top 5. Rampage, starring The Rock, a movie about a video game, is in number 9, and finally cracking the top 10, but not for long, Solo, a Star Wars story. Oh, how I could talk about how people are overblowing the whole Lucasfilms is in free fall, but I don't have the strength.
We had that discussion when we talked about Solo.
Yeah. Currently sitting at number 20 though is Ant-Man and the Wasp, and as I said, over the weeks to come, I'm sure it'll climb another 10 points. Whether or not it stays in the top 10 is a whole other story. With Aquaman,
probably not.
With Aquaman, Bumblebee, and Wicked coming out later this year.
Aquaman is not. No. Aquaman is not a consideration.
Sure it is.
No, it's really not.
Nah, that's easily a $500 million film.
Really?
Yeah, I'll put money on that. At least.
Really?
Yep.
You're going to bank on that character.
Yes.
With that franchise and that history.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
We need to come up with some kind of bet for this.
Gosh, what do I want to risk?
It can wait. I mean, there's plenty of time before it comes out, but that's the type of thing that I feel we need to wager on.
I will give you 3 passes in 2019 if I'm wrong. But if I'm right, you get no passes.
What was I passing on in 2019?
Shaft. Son of Shaft.
I really don't want to see that.
It's up to you.
Let me think about that.
Okay.
Let me think about that.
The deal is, it has to, for me to win, it has to cross 500 million. If it gets to 499 million, I lose.
By what date? We do need to set a date on this.
By the time it hits Blu-ray.
No, because Son of Shaft will have been released, but will be out in theaters by the time it hits Blu-ray.
All right, we'll talk about this offline.
We do need a date for a cutoff point for that. Otherwise you'll be in denial about Gambit not being made for a year and a half.
Well, Son of Shaft comes out in the summer. This thing will be on Blu-ray by. I mean, Infinity War came out in May. It's already going to be on Blu-ray in July.
That's because Disney actually has their act together.
Offline, we'll have to look and see how long it took Justice League to come to Blu-ray. All right.
You know what? We could probably go with just how long it takes it to get. How about this? By the time it drops to a single screen in your closest theater and my closest theater.
No, I'm not paying that close attention to that. Give it 6. I'll tell you what. We'll give it 6 weeks.
4.
6.
You're the one saying it's like an easy $500 million movie. It should be able to do that in 4 weeks.
6.
I'll split you with 5.
6.
I'm not doing 6.
I like even numbers.
Why?
Because I do. I think 6 weeks is not unreasonable thing to ask. We'll talk about it later.
We'll figure out the details, but you have significantly more faith in all of. I mean, come on, Justice League didn't even hit 500 million, did it?
Hang on. So that comes that comes out in December. Its biggest competition around that time will be Bumblebee and, to a lesser degree, Wicked. That being said...
No, its biggest competition is the fact that it's freaking Aquaman and the whole DCEU is tanked.
Oh God! And it's actually here's what's coming out that same week: Alita, Battle Angel, Bumblebee, Holmes and Watson, and Welcome to Marwen, which is some sort of Universal drama. Theoretically, there's another Warner Brothers event film coming out around the same time. In January, here's what it'll be up against in January.
January always sucks.
In the amount of time that we're talking about. Here's what's listed so far: a horror movie called Eli, something called Ad Astra, which is a sci-fi thriller, A Dog's Way Home, Hellboy, which is a remake, What Men Want, which is a comedy, Glass, which is part of the Unbreakable franchise, Miss Bala, which is an action thriller of some sort, and an untitled STX action thriller. Yeah.
Okay, that's not happening, first of all. Let's be clear about that. We're not that far out. If you don't even have a title for it, it's not happening, guys.
All right, so if it comes out the 22nd, you know what? Fine. I'll give it a month. Because I'm looking at what's coming out in that month, and I'm like, yeah, that's still doable.
500 million.
Just to tell you, if I remember correctly, Justice League made $500 million, and that was a train wreck.
Yeah, barely, and it was sold as a major event movie. This is a standalone after that train wreck, with a much less known character, with a much worse leading actor.
Wrong. On a budget of $300 million, yeah, right? It was $657 million, is what it says here.
Okay, so. I mean, much as I'd say barely over. That's barely over. And that was their big event film.
Let's see. How much did Wonder Woman make?
There's nothing to attach the same type of pseudo-cultural fervor to an Aquaman that there is in Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman made more than Justice League, if memory serves. That was over $700 million.
I'm trying to find her movie. There we go. Wonder Woman in film. Yeah, here we go. And how much did she make? She made $821 million.
Okay. Yeah, they're standalone because, in no small part, because it was a better movie. Made more than their big, big crossover.
It's being directed by James Wan.
I know, and I like James Wan, and I like his work.
So let's see, what is James Wan known for?
Saw and The Conjuring.
A bunch of Saw movies.
Hey, he only directed the first one.
Annabelle.
Conjuring. The Conjuring 2. Annabelle, he did Fast and the Furious 7? The first one with Jason Statham. I forget what number that was.
Yep, that was Furious 7. Wow, he's done a lot of horror movies.
Yeah, he helped revitalize the whole freaking genre. I love his horror stuff. I like James Wan and his work, generally speaking.
And apparently he's also possibly directing and definitely producing the Swamp Thing television show.
That's a good fit, actually. I like that.
Yep, easily $500 million. We're good. I bet it does.
I don't know.
I bet it does at least. I bet it does at least $500 million in China.
How do you figure? What leads you to that conclusion?
One, I think comic book character. First of all, I think the comic book movies tend to do well over there.
So if you're saying this thing takes $500 million just in China?
That's not what I'm betting on. But I said. I did say I'll bet. That's not the bet.
That's actually why that's actually factoring into my consideration of as far as release schedule, because that might not come out in China until 3 weeks after it's come out here.
All right, we can finalize this later, but I
don't know. I mean, I might not take that because I really, really don't want to see Son of Shaft.
Well, then stop arguing with me, asshole. All right, let's move on. So, I have a question for you.
Please ask.
Are you ready? No! I said, are you ready?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Alrighty. Now, normally I do my homework and I, beforehand sort through these and decide which ones I want to read, which ones I don't. I didn't have time, so I'm just going to read these cold. I might look ahead while you're screaming, and and figure out which ones I want to read ahead of time. But for the most part, I haven't the foggiest clue what these people didn't like about this movie.
All right.
So, Matthew Rosa of Salon.com, top critic. Aside from a few flourishes of aesthetic inventiveness and a single moment of genuine wonder, Ant-Man and the Wasp doesn't do very much with its premise.
Its premise is... it lives up to its premise. How much more for a guy who spent a bunch of this thing arguing that it's not very well written? I'm genuinely curious as to how this guy would have made it better.
Johnny
I'm also genuinely curious as to what moment of wonder he's referring to.
Probably when Hank was in the quantum realm, which was like an acid trip. Johnny Oleksinski.
Hey, the 60s were fun, but he sure is paying for it now.
Top critic. Ant-Man and the Wasp, the first sequel to 2015's Ant-Man, is barely an exoskeleton next to its much better predecessor. Ugh.
Hang on, let me think. Because there's a significant discussion that has to be had, if that's going to be your position, about how much a cohesive vision impacts your perception of objective quality versus the patchwork of the first one, but that was probably better written, just uneven. I'm not prepared to accept that premise necessarily.
Matthew Lacona of San Diego Reader, top critic. Would be okay and maybe even fun were it not for the frequent presence of a gruesome ghost haunting the proceedings. A woman in constant physical and emotional agony who is trying desperately not to die. A weirdly disturbing fly in the amiable ointment.
Oh, boy, it sure would be nice if there weren't actual, conflict in these things. We could just be so much. It's just so much more fun if everyone has fun and gets along. Profoundly stupid premise.
Mara Reinstein of U.S. Weekly, top critic. We hate you, Mara Reinstein. We hate you.
I don't remember her name ever being brought in before.
Trust me, we hate
I will take your word for it.
A light, watered-down tonic leading up to next May's Avengers 4 extravaganza.
I'm struggling to really find issue with that. Because it is light. We discussed that. I'd argue watered down in the sense that, hey, more action and less talky. And it is fundamentally designed to lead into Infinity War and whatever Avengers 4 is, actually. I mean, it's an accurate sentence. Yeah, I don't take that many issues with that, actually.
Darren Franich of Entertainment Weekly, top critic. This is one of those Marvel products peddling self-aware detachment as a defining narrative strategy. It feels less like a feature film than a meme somebody made about an Ant-Man trailer.
No? Going with no. This is not self-aware detachment. This is deliberately set in a different chronological period from the other stuff. I mean, look, I was worried that they were going to not have this, like this was going to take place just nebulously between the two events, between Civil War and Infinity War, and there was going to be no reference to it at all. Or maybe like they're all sitting together on the couch and we see the Q ship's arrival in New York. And that's our tie-in. Much happier with the way they did it. I mean, if you want self-aware detachment as arguably a defining characteristic, that we can listen to Mark and I review Luke Cage Season 2.
And Ronnie Adams was there too. Chris Stuckman of ChrisStuckman.com. We hates you, Chris Stuckman.
Has to work for himself.
A passably entertaining film with no answers to its biggest questions.
What biggest questions? That is not a valid criticism. Hang on. If you want to call it blindly, passively entertaining and utterly unremarkable in that respect, sure, that's fair. But it doesn't answer its biggest questions. What questions did it ask? Scott wanted to get off of house arrest. He did. They wanted to get Janet out of the quantum realm. They did. They even saved the woman who'd been trying to kill them for most of the movie at the end to make them the ultimate good guys. Like, what big sweeping question was asked by this movie that it didn't... Again, if you want to complain about it being light popcorn fare, fine. That's okay. You can complain about that. You can criticize that. I have. Mark has. But to then tack on, it doesn't actually answer its biggest questions. What big question did it ask that it then failed to answer? That's a flawed premise. That's just not accurate.
Roger Moore of Movie Nation. One word.
Oh, he hates Roger Moore.
Underwhelming.
I mean, relative to what? You know, like, what were your expectations for this, and how did it fail to meet them?
You're going to love this next one. James Berardinelli of Real Views, top critic. Plotting, repetitive, replete with technobabble nonsense and lifeless action. This is easily the worst written of any of the 20 MCU offerings, and maybe the worst all-around film featuring a Marvel superhero since Sony rebooted Spider-Man.
Okay.
So we're just going to not acknowledge X-Men 3 or...
No. Okay, so here's the list of pieces of crap that you are ignoring. All right? Catwoman. Which might have actually... I have to double-check the chronology, but I think that came out after... Sony, again, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, which I believe is the point he drew.
Yeah.
Or did he say reboot, in which case it would be the Amazing...
It's the Amazing Spider-Man. It's the Amazing Spider-Man he's talking about.
Okay. So, we will set aside... Okay, so that sets aside Catwoman. I'd have to double-check the chronology, but yeah, there's X3. There's X-Men Apocalypse. There's the Four-Stick. The Four-Stick! You miserable slag heap. How can you even say that with a straight face? And I complained about the writing of this movie. How can you possibly say that it's even remotely close to as badly written and executed as the Four-Stick? There's no way you can say that with anything approaching intellectual honesty. Absolutely none. There's Justice League, which was horribly written. There's Thor Ragnarok, which sucked. But this guy probably lied. I mean, even if we just limit this to the MCU, okay? Because he also brought up that qualifier. All right? But rather than tackle the wide swath of terrible, terrible superhero movies that have come out, including The Amazing Spider-Man 2, including... Oh, what was the other one? I mean, I'd argue Dawn of Justice. I genuinely would argue that was worse. I mean, there's just, again, so there's a lot of them that's patently untrue for, because I assume this guy just doesn't know they existed. What do you mean there was a new Fantastic Four movie? I didn't see it, therefore it's not real. No. I saw it. It's real. Comparing these two is execrable. So let's just limit this to the MCU, right? Really? You think this is worse written than Thor: The Dark World? Really? You really think this is worse written than, again, like the whole middle section of Iron Man 2? Than the overutilized kidnapping trope from Shane Black's Iron Man 3? You really... I mean, I actually took less issue with Iron Man 3 than a lot of people, mind you.
Come on, go make fun of the Hulk again.
I don't count the Hulk. If I counted the Incredible Hulk, yes. It's worse. I mean, the Incredible Hulk reads... The Incredible Hulk is a movie, plays like a bad television episode or made-for-TV movie that was designed to follow, in some respects, the Eric Bana Ang Lee's version of that was just Hulk. Like, it's not good.
Brian Orndorff of Blu-ray.com. Instantly forgettable and habitually unfunny.
Forgettable, I would agree with. I'm not sure I'd agree with habitually unfunny. There's some laughs here. Look, for as much as I think, let me say it, this is going to sound weird. For as much as I think the scenes that I'm going to reference should not have been in the movie, they were funny. The truth serum bit, where they just argue the semantics. I laughed. Again, I thought the movie's stronger if they don't include it, but funny. There's too much Michael Peña. Fine. There's always too much Michael Peña. That's a universally true statement about the world. I'm just not sure I'd go with unfunny, or with habitually unfunny, because, again, your sense of humor is different from person to person, so I'm not sure how fair it is to say that.
I'm going to read two more. Laura Clifford of Reeling Reviews. This terminally boring by-the-numbers installment is credited to 5 screenwriters, and they've all come up with is an inverse game of hot potato with the usual assembly of players. The good guys, the bad guys, the law, and the wild card.
I might take minor issue with the paint by numbers, because they actually, again, they tweak that just a bit. But the rest of that, yeah, that's kind of fair.
John Urbansich of YourMoviesCleveland.com. At least one of us is way up to here with these comic book based tales.
Get off my lawn. At least, if that's going to be your premise, at least say it. I mean, I'd like to think that when I go into, my ranting about these kids today or the state of cinema, it's at least prefaced that way. I can at least say I'm going into get off my lawn mode. I mean, again, at least have the intellectual honesty to preface it that way. Don't just say, "Oh God, I am so sick of these movies." Why? Because there's a very simple answer to your existential crises of why these movies exist. It's money, because they make money, and films and production companies have to make money if they want to keep making movies. It's not that complicated.
So I quickly looked on Box Office Mojo to see if there's any changes and apparently Disney just released a whole bunch of date changes. Mary Poppins Returns moved from Christmas Day back a week to the 19th, and
sadly they did not just remove it from the schedule.
And I didn't see it when I looked on the Wikipedia page, but apparently we do have an October release. Dwayne Johnson's Jungle Cruise.
They had not. I was not aware that was coming out in October.
Yep. Well, it moved from October 4th to October 11th.
I guess there is something we'll be reviewing then, won't there?
Yep. What a cast. Dwayne Johnson, Emily Blunt, Jesse Plemons, Edgar Ramirez, and Paul Giamatti.
I hope they cash the checks. All I'm going to say about that. I mean, and again, I just made the joke about it, but with that, because again, you figure Skyscraper's going to hang around theaters, maybe not literally until this comes out, but basically from February until December, The Rock will have a movie out of some variety. Whatever else you want to say about him, that man works.
Shit, this fucks up my schedule.
How so?
Well, it's coming out October 11th.
Oh, does it screw up whatever week you had devoted to something else?
Yep, Gotham by Gaslight.
So push that back a week, or move it up a week, or do it as a special one-off on a different night with somebody else. You just presented a problem. I gave you like 4 solutions.
You know what? I'm going to assume that this untitled Disney thing is not going to happen. Let's take that off of there.
Which one?
Untitled live action.
And from what date?
Oh, October 4th.
That's probably the Jungle Cruise.
Oh, that's right. Duh.
Because it's a Disney movie.
And it moved up a week. Okay. All right, so let's move Gotham by Gaslight back a week, and let's put Jungle Book in that place. Oh, that worked out well.
Speaking of, who's going to be reviewing Gotham by Gaslight with you?
Not you, apparently.
I just don't think I'd have anything interesting to say. I mean, I'll be honest, like, that's
I
the
didn't
biggest...
think we'd have interesting to say about Ant-Man and the Wasp, but you and I got into an hour-long sissy slap fight.
Yeah. I also hate the animation style that the animated DC stuff has adopted lately. It's way too, like, mediocre anime for my taste.
Good book.
I mean, I always...
By the way, good catch on that October 4th thing.
I am good for something.
Yeah, you are.
It's recognizing the obvious.
Indeed. All right, I think we're done here. So the whole reason I was actually even looking at this is because they just moved Indiana Jones back yet another year to 2021.
I maintain they're waiting for Harrison Ford to die so they can recast the role.
All right, so let's not continue to bore.
Or they're waiting for George Lucas to die so he doesn't have any input.
So let's not continue to bore the shit out of people here. Next week, Robert and I will.
Or they're waiting for Shia LaBeouf's contract to lapse so they don't have to have him back.
Really? It had to interrupt me for that? Just had to get that out of yourself? The one less Shia LaBeouf crack?
Or they're waiting for the writing to actually be good. Or they're waiting for an opening in Steven Spielberg's schedule.
Are you done yet?
I could probably drag this out for a little bit longer, but I respect the fact that you're tired and we'll stop.
Thanks. You're a peach. Next week on Damn You Hollywood, we'll be reviewing The Rock's take on a Die Hard movie, his ode to Die Hard, Skyscraper. And then the following week, Robert and I will be reviewing Voltron, Seasons 5 and 6. Hopefully Robert Cooper will also be able to join us, but one never knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men. And then we're back to finish up July.
Who knows?
That's right. We're back on July 31st to review Mission Impossible, Fallout. In August, we round out.
I think Falling is my interest in that franchise.
We've got 2 more reviews in the month of August to get through, and then Robert finally is done with the summer of his discontent. But the winter of his discontent will be right around the block.
It leads right into the autumn of my discontent, so it works.
Yeah. So we've got Christopher Robin on August 7th. We've got The Meg on August 14th. I don't even know what the hell we're going to talk about for our summer wrap-up at this point. But we do one. So our summer wrap-up show will be August 21st. There'll be a TV party for Legion with myself and probably Jesse Starcher and whoever else wants to join us. Again, we'll skip a few weeks here, and then Robert and I, in our only Damn You Hollywood for the month of September, because September is known as Sucktember, we've got The Predator.
It's what February used to be.
It is what February used to be.
And to be fair, The Predator is going to suck. But we're going to review it.
That takes us into October, where we'll be reviewing Venom. Robert will be on for a very special TV party tonight. We'll review Hannibal Season 2. We'll review the new Halloween.
And ask Ben if he wants to be on for that, because he loves that show probably more than I do, actually. And we both... I miss when it was on. We'd talk about it after it happened.
Yeah, so we'll review Venom with Jason Teasley, and then we'll review the new Halloween movie, and that's it for the month of October. And that leads us into November and December, which we'll talk about when we get a little bit closer.
Alrighty. That is the schedule, and the doomsday clock that is my involvement in this show is steadily ticking towards midnight. It's going to hit one day, and I'm just going to throw up my hands and go, I'm out. I've had it.
Let me also quick plug tomorrow.
That's all I could stand.
One more thing I want to plug. Tomorrow night on the Metal Hammer of Doom, Jesse Starcher and I, we got big tings happening as we review Skindred's Big Tings.
The second half of that is not a word.
Big tings, Robert Winfrey.
Again, not a word.
Do you have big tings? We've got big tings happening on the Metal Hammer of Doom. It's big tings in the Rattlegion Broadcasting Network, I'll tell you that much. Big tings.
I will be so relieved when you no longer reference album titles that aren't actually words.
You don't like big tings? Everyone likes big tings.
Look, the only other guy I know who pronounces that, I only know two other people who pronounce that the same way you do. One of them just had to pull out of a fight with concussion symptoms. The other is pissing away millions of dollars.
I'm not pronouncing things wrong. That's the name of the album, Big Tings. Tings.
I always assumed that was the case. It's
Okay.
still not a thing. It's not a word. It's just a sequence of letters that loosely represents a phonetic sound. It's not actually a word with an appreciable definition. It's not part of the cultural lexicon as such. Why are they putting it on the album cover?
Plug your show.
And that's how I know I break Mark. All right. Last Sunday, myself and Jeff Harris, we reviewed UFC 226, which was pretty good, and The Ultimate Fighter finale season 27, which was terrible. We lamented the upcoming Ultimate Fighter season 28 because poor Larry Zonka has to actually cover the shit show that is The Ultimate Fighter. And we gave a brief preview to UFC Fight Night 133, which I will have coverage of this coming Saturday in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. So if you're into the sport, stop by, say hello. Sunday we will review that and preview Fight Night 134. I believe that's the plan, at least. It's a weird fight night. It says it's the 22nd, but it's Germany, so it could be on the other side of... It could just be, Saturday evening here, so I'll double check some of the start times for that, but we will probably preview that upcoming. I mean, we'll preview it one way or the other. The question is whether or not there's a show on Sunday the 22nd. So you can look forward to that. Again, Mark went over what we'll be reviewing, and that's pretty much all I have to plug as far as that goes. So
I actually have a breaking news.
All right.
Another one of the Disney live actions that actually has a title now. You want to know what it is?
Not really, but go ahead and tell me anyway.
May 29th, 2020, Maleficent 2.
Piss on that.
I can't wait to review that one with you.
I mean, I'm hard... Oh, God, how do I say this? I almost said it can't be worse than the first one, but that's really wrong. I know how bad these things can get. No, I got nothing. Just don't be better than the first one.
All right, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and unlike me, don't want to kill yourself. So,
Mark, that's my life.
Oh, sorry. Did I steal your line?
How you feel right now is how I feel basically all the time.
Terrific. And for more of that sort of thing, tune in next week when we review Skyscraper here on Damn You Hollywood. For Robert Winfrey, who is perpetually fighting off the urge to kill himself, and for Mark Radlish...
We joke, but some weeks, man.
And for Mark Radlish, who currently feels like he wants to kill himself after tonight's review. And for all you audience members who want to kill yourself after listening to this review, this has been Damn You Hollywood. We'll be back next week. Be well, be safe, and behave.